Climb the hill, climb the hill. Sisters together, won't you climb the hill?
Every day across Canada, in every public and private sector workplace, women are building this country's economy. You'll find us in clerical, sales, and services, in construction, manufacturing, and skilled trades, providing healthcare and education. We work in every sector. For both men and women, the demands and rigors of work are often difficult and stressful. But when women go to work, we face additional pressures because we are women.
It's human nature to think that's been dealt with, it wouldn't happen now, and we sort of checklist it off our radar. And so that women have to yet again climb the hill to establish that sexual harassment still occurs and they still shouldn't have to be facing this at the workplace.
There was so much fear. Even in my house, it was fear.
It was so demoralizing, it just was so horrible that this could happen to me.
I tried so hard for this not to happen, and somehow she has slipped through the cracks.
The Canadian Human Rights Act and the Canada Labour Code, both of which cover federal employees, as well as the Ontario Human Rights Code, all contain prohibitions against sexual harassment. Behaviours can include verbal remarks about your body, staring, leering, or touching you inappropriately. Sexual harassment is about discrimination on the basis of gender. So blocking access to a job because it's viewed as a man's job or refusing to train are examples of behaviors that are unlawful.
There are many places that women could go to assert their claims of harassment, be it sexual harassment in and of itself, or be it sexual harassment combined with many of the intersected grounds such as race or disability. For example, outside of the human rights commissions and the statutory prohibitions against it, many women find it much more comfortable to go to their union within the workplace and file a grievance, or to approach their union's women's committee to get the support that is very necessary for asserting these claims. Women might get sexually assaulted, and if so, they should also be considering criminal charges.
A problem for youth in the workplace and young workers everywhere is sexual harassment. One of the biggest problems that we have is we are the lowest of the low. Actually, what happened to me is I was working in a large grocery store as a cashier, and there was a fellow employee that was quite a bit older than me, and it was a male, and he continually made comments to me and kind of made rude gestures and was kind of looking at me inappropriately, and I really felt a little bit uncomfortable, but I wasn't really certain that what is sexual harassment. Everybody gets the video coming in or the little blurb on it when you first start your first job, or this is sexual harassment's bad, we don't tolerate it, and that's that. But is this sexual harassment? I kind of was questioning myself, and it just seemed, I felt uncomfortable, but I wasn't really sure. So one day, I came into work, and he had actually made a comment that I should unbutton a couple more buttons on my blouse of my uniform. He thought that it might be a better viewing for everybody there. So when he said that to me, all of a sudden it just clicked. I thought, you know what, this is totally inappropriate. This shouldn't be happening, especially in a workplace. I shouldn't be scared to come in or feel nervous to come into a workplace because of this individual. And I felt like I needed to do something about it.
For a home care worker, most of them are women, and sexual harassment is the biggest thing we have to deal with.
Of all the years I've been with that agency, I didn't see any responsibility, because I give you an example. One time a man was grabbing me all over, and I reported. Did she back me up, my supervisor? No. She said, go back. Maybe it was just he was on drugs, or you didn't know what just forgive him this time. The next time I went in, it was different. He waited till I was in the room, the bedroom.
In 2005, the public was horrified to read news of the murder of Laurie DuPont at Windsor's Hotel Dieu Grace Hospital. The 36-year-old registered nurse was stabbed to death at work by a physician. The Ontario Nurses Association had to fight long and hard to even secure a coroner's inquest. Testimony at it revealed that the hospital had failed to understand its obligation to keep its staff safe from harassment and harm, and failed to ensure a safe workplace. The doctor who killed Lori had more than a decade-long history of anger, aggression, and of sexually harassing nurses at work. But his behavior was allowed to continue, not just toward Lori DuPont, but aimed at others as well.
I pushed my chair back to push him back, and I got up and I ran to my manager's office. And I said, I'm not working with him anymore. I'm afraid of him. I'm afraid of what he's going to do to me, do to others up here. I will refuse. I will not work with him anymore. She agreed. She couldn't accommodate me on afternoon shift. Just on the day shift, she could accommodate that. First time I went back to work, what room am I scheduled to work with? Mark Daniels. She hadn't passed the message on to the charge nurse. So I went to the charge nurse. I'm not working with him. There's no way I'm working with him. So they changed me to the next room. The next day I go back, different charge nurse. What room am I scheduled in? Mark Daniels' room. The phone rang about 9 o'clock in the morning, and somebody had called, and one of my past co-workers had called and said, what's happening at your hospital? Something's happened. I heard a doctor stabbed a nurse. I thought that somebody maybe had thrown a scalpel on a mail stand and the nurse's hand might have been, it just didn't even click in my head. So I said, oh, I'll call over and find out what happened. So I called over and the ward clerk answered the phone and I said, what's going on over there? I heard that somebody got stabbed. And the ward clerk said that Mark had stabbed Lori. And then very quietly she got on the phone, like while she was on the phone, and she said, and she's gone.
This is Bonnie Robichaud today. She's happy and healthy. She has a great life. But 30 years ago, her work life was nothing less than hell. She was a cleaner for the Department of National Defense when she was promoted to becoming the only female lead hand supervisor on the base. The ongoing sexual harassment from her supervisor over a 6-month period threatened her job and her mental health.
Now this may sound kind of odd, but the harasser did such a number on my psyche that if I didn't fight back, I would be either in a bottle, which is either alcohol or drugs, or I'd be dead. I wrote up 10 grievances. And one was that I'd been discriminated on the basis of sex by my foreman for having sexually harassed me. It took 8 years for the Supreme Court to say I won, but that was the day I won.
Why?
Because I fought back in a much more public way, and in a written way, where I actually went to the employer and I said, this is this. It was no more just talk, it was in an official way. So that's the day that I won.
Bonnie's determination to continue, despite all of the obstacles and appeals, ended when the Supreme Court of Canada agreed to hear the case. And in 1987, her victory forever changed the workplace, not just for women, but for all workers who are subject to harassment and discrimination.
When I got the Supreme Court decision, it was just an amazing, amazing feeling that, there's nothing to give your self-esteem back than 7 Supreme Court judges with a unanimous decision saying that the employer was liable.
I credit Bonnie Robichaud with bringing all the anti-harassment policies that many workplaces have to life, because the Supreme Court made it clear that it is the employer's duty to try to prevent harassment, and that it's almost one of the standard ways to do it is to at least start with a policy saying that it's inappropriate, and to make sure that the employer recognizes their responsibility for maintaining a harassment-free workplace by telling people that as part of their corporate culture and policy, this is not to be allowed.
There are many ways that we can address things, but I was at the situation where I felt I needed a formal process. I needed something in writing to say this is what was happening. And I approached my union because I didn't feel that within my workplace there were other people that would speak out. And it was merely just writing down all of the incidents that had happened to me that made me step back and say, no way am I going to allow this to happen. And I know that my work is good enough. I know that after working in an organization for 6 years, I had the right to be there and I should continue. And there was something inside me that just said, I'm not going to give up. And it was hard. But I continued. And after successful arbitration, when the arbitrator said, yes, you're right, this is sexual harassment, and you do not have to work at workplace, you don't have to put up with this, you don't have the right to live within a toxic workplace, you are right, I felt that that was the best victory that I could have had. I didn't want a letter of apology, I just wanted someone else to say, you're right, you don't have to tolerate it, and you did the right thing.
Gwenda Ashby D'Souza's 14-month ordeal started with verbal attacks from a customer and quickly escalated to physical violence when he came after her, first with a walking stick, then with a knife. Gwenda was entitled to file for workers' compensation. Now known as the Workplace Safety and Insurance Board, many workers are frustrated in their attempts to secure compensation. But for Gwenda, the system worked, and it helped get her back on her feet.
I was able to go to counseling because when they contacted me when I filed my application for workman comp, 3 months to my being at home, they called me and was talking to me and realized that, you know what, after the conversation, she said to me that, you know what, you're not ready to go to work, because I was still crying and reeking over the whole not sleeping and stuff over the whole incident. And they decided that, you know, they offered me this program. And I decided, you know, that I would, you know, go and you know, see what it is all about. And I did benefit greatly from that 7 months of therapy. Today I can attest that it's because of that therapy I was able to get up and go back out to work and go out to the street, go out and do my grocery shopping alone, get on the bus alone and stuff, because I never used to go anywhere without somebody accompanying me after this thing happened.
This is no longer acceptable in our workplaces, and things have to change. None of these things are acceptable. The jokes that are told in the workplace, posters put up on walls, writings on walls, none of these things are acceptable.
We really need to get to the core of what the problem is, and to make sure that, you know, people understand where it comes from. You know, we've come some ways when they talk about things that have happened, and people have talked about, you know, cases. I mean, no longer, I would hope, in the out in the other world, outside of the labor world, that, you know, women and the sisters out there are going to be judged by what they were wearing in a sexual assault case. Hopefully, we've come past some of that. But, you know, contrary to the cigarette ad from a few years ago, we haven't come that far, baby.
We haven't come as far as we would wish. Despite the fact that sexual harassment is pervasive, it's low on employers' priority lists. We need quick action to protect against all forms of harassment, whether it's sexual, racial, aimed at lesbians or gays, or any other groups.
Sexual harassment is really a fundamental discrimination issue, and to treat it and eradicate it, you need to understand that. And so that means not just focusing on complaints by individuals and making them have the problem of having to address that, but also looking at what I would say are 3 different ways to do it. The first one is to, in fact, take what I would call employment equity measures. These are measures which actually start to restructure workplaces so they're more equitable for women, so that women have equal pay, so that they have access to jobs in the workplace on the same basis as men, childcare, a whole series of ways in which they will become less vulnerable and therefore less exposed to sexual harassment and attacks like that. The second part is, in fact, to ensure that there's appropriate education and training. At various points, employers, co-workers don't understand well enough the dynamics of sexual harassment, the really strong impacts and negative impacts it has on women and it has on their equality. And so that strong training and communication has to be there. And then the third part of it is actually having an effective complaint mechanism for women, and one that allows them to do it without reprisals, and that ensures that they can do it in a way that they can continue to work in that workplace, but to do so in a discrimination-free way.
What I'll say to women, don't minimize, okay? Don't minimize a situation when it happens again, from my experience. From that first, the get-go, okay, the get-go, do something about it, okay? Throw the responsibility on who's supposed to be responsible, and it is management.
I really want to send a message to encourage people to label sexual harassment as it is. Because one of the things that I find is identification and labeling, and that is a first step in order to be able to create change within our workplaces.
Nurses have to, especially the young ones, if something like that happens to them, or if they felt like they're being touched inappropriately, or inappropriate comments are being said to them, don't be afraid to speak up. Make sure that you talk to somebody about it, or talk to your union person about it. Talk to somebody about it. You're probably not alone, even though at that moment you feel like you're alone and it's only happened to you. More than likely, if somebody has said something inappropriate to you or is touching you inappropriately, it's probably happened to somebody else.
And remember, solidarity isn't just a word. It makes all the difference.
But the various big unions did a lot of support. The Ontario Federation of Labour, like I say, will always have a good spot in my heart, because they gave that support. The women there gave that support, and I was crushed, and it made all the difference.
For every woman, there are numerous courses of action. Each person will come to her own decision about which one is right for her. But for all working people, women and men, it's time to climb the hill again, to ensure that we don't have to encounter sexual harassment in the first place.
Climb the hill, climb the hill. Sisters together, won't you climb the hill? Climb the hill, climb the hill. Come on, Union sisters, won't you climb that hill? Climb the hill, climb the hill. Sisters together, won't you climb the hill? Climb the hill, climb the hill. Come on, Union sisters, won't you climb that hill?
No one ever gains when a harasser does not refrain. The pain remains until the day that we stand and know we say we fight for better days. Together we can climb that hill. Together we can overcome the fear instilled. The hardest thing to face, whether at home or in the workplace, is sexual harassment. Hard to believe, but so many of us are left to grieve, not knowing where to receive aid or assistance.